Hi, everybody. Welcome to our discussion here on Chapter 4 of Noe's book on fundamentals of human resource management. In this discussion, we're going to be talking about analyzing work and designing jobs. Now, a job analysis is the process of getting detailed information about jobs. And people always wonder, why do we need to do a job analysis if a job is already in place? Don't we know what people do for a living? And I think a great example of why a job analysis is necessary comes from my time in industry when I was a pricing manager. When I took over the position, my vice president had come up with an idea of redesigning a small portion of the position, taking away some responsibilities that the pricing manager would have, adding some different responsibilities, and so on. As time went on, I also evolved what the position was. The previous person in the position had spent about a week every month doing a specific administrative task, and I found that doing this task was creating some problems in the sense that it caused a lag in changes of pricing and had a negative impact on our customers. So I developed an automated system for doing this task, and the automated system sped up the entire process and reduced it basically from a week long to a couple hours a week, or a couple hours a month, excuse me. Well, what that did was that freed up a week of my month and allowed me to take on some different responsibilities. So as a result of this, my job evolved quite a bit. The problem was one day I ended up having a new vice president. My vice president said, "I don't even know what your job is," when we were talking. And the reason that he didn't know what my job was because nobody except for me knew what it was, because nobody had analyzed the job after we had made a lot of changes to it. So the problem that comes about from a situation like this is, say I leave the company, how do they know what they need to replace me if they don't even know the job that I'm doing? And that's where job analysis comes into play. And it's why we need to gather detailed information about jobs periodically and make sure we have accurate information on what it is that different positions involve. From a job analysis, we can help to develop job descriptions. Okay, and a job description is a list of the tasks, duties, and responsibilities that a job involves. It's basically exactly what it sounds like it would be. A job description describes what it is you're going to do in a specific role. Okay, and job descriptions are important because as people look at jobs and try to identify whether or not they're interested in applying for a position, the job description helps them have a realistic expectation of what their title is going to be, what it is that they're going to be doing daily, what types of responsibilities they need to be prepared to handle. A poor job description doesn't prepare people for these things. So when you have a good job description, people can enter a position with a realistic expectation of what it is they're going to do, and you're going to have a better chance of having a good fit between person and position. Now, in here we have an example of a job description. You'll see the job description starts with a title for the position right here. Okay, it also gives you an overview. Okay, and this overview kind of just tells you just the basic goals of the company and the position and what the mission is that you're looking to support. And then we get down to the actual job description itself. Okay, we see this is an entry level position. Okay, they give the more detailed titles that you'll be applying for right here as switch person or break person. Okay, and they tell you what type of work you're gonna be doing in terms of being on ground traffic control. All right, there is a little description of experience, but they mention that they provide training, and then as you go on, they tell about the future where you can go from this position. Then we move on to the duties of the position. Okay, and this is where it's critical in the job description. Okay, so for one, they mention being outdoors, so you're going to have to be out in weather conditions. They talk about being 12 feet above the ground, so that if you're afraid of heights, this probably isn't the job for you. Okay, they discuss the type of protective equipment you're going to have to wear so that you're prepared for that. Okay, they talk about carrying things, stepping on and off equipment so that you understand, potentials for trip hazards, working with ladders. So there's a pretty good detail in here as to some of the things that you can expect to engage in as you if you do if you do choose to pursue this job. Now, job specifications differ from job descriptions in that a specification is guiding us towards understanding what it is that we're going to need in order to be qualified for the job. Okay, so what types of skills do we have to have? Okay, in terms of proficiency at tasks, what types of abilities might be required? Okay, are there licenses or education that are required for a position? Your job specifications lay out the qualifications that you're going to be looking for, and they help to guide you towards unbiased hiring. Now, it's critically important that your job specifications are actually related to the work that's going to be done in a position. Okay. And as we look at this example, this is really interesting because you'll see as they start in the requirements section here, one of the things they say is that you're going to have to be able to speak and read English. But they also specify why. Because you'll be asked to follow posted bulletins, regulations, rule books, timetables, etc. Okay, so they have a specification here, but they also justify it in this case. All right, they talk about the ability to use a keyboard, okay, being able to count and compare numbers. But essentially what you do is you're going down through a list here and reading about what the requirements are. Okay. As you get down to the lifting, they talk about being physically strong, lifting up to 25 pounds and even up to 50 pounds occasionally. And then they have a very specific number here of 83 pounds infrequently. And as you look at that very specific number, that indicates that they actually have a specific piece of equipment in mind as they're coming up with this. All right, they also talk about the need to have good balance and specify that it's because you're going to be regularly stepping on and off of equipment and working from ladders. All right, so as you look through the specifications in this job, you can clearly see how they are related to some of the tasks that a person in this position would be performing. In our job analysis, it's important that we get information from valid and reliable sources. Okay, so three common sources of information that are used in job analysis are incumbents, the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which is published by the US Department of Labor, and the Occupational Information Network, which is commonly called ONET and is also developed by the Labor Department. Okay. Now, it's important that we use all of these sources and we don't just pick and choose. And the reason for this is while the DOT and ONET might have some great information that generalizes across industry, incumbents in your own company might know specific things about jobs in your organization that are unique to your organization. So they may be able to help you contextualize the information from ONET and the DOT a little bit better. All right. If we rely solely on incumbents, however, they're going to be biased towards their experience with the position, their experience with the company, and they may not consider certain aspects to a job that should be considered. And that's where the sources provided by the Department of Labor help. Now, one way that we can perform a job analysis is through using something called the Fleischman job analysis system. And what the Fleischman job analysis system does is it takes a whole bunch of different abilities. Typically, there's a list of 52 different abilities, and we have subject matter experts evaluate each of these abilities in terms of how they're related to the job. They'll validate them based upon a scale. There's specific questions for each ability, but the subject matter experts will rank all the abilities, will take averages, and then using that data that we've collected from the subject matter experts, we can prioritize abilities that should be associated with the job. And once we're done with our job analysis, we're typically going to use it either for job design or work redesign. Okay, more often than not, we'll see it be used for work redesign as positions have already been established, but we're making changes to try to make the company more efficient or improve quality. So we're redefining what positions do, and that's what work redesign is. Work redesign is essentially the same as job design, but we're just applying what we've done to a job that already exists. Effective design, however, doesn't just involve job analysis. It also involves conducting a thorough workflow analysis, and that's what we're going to discuss next. Effective workflow analysis involves looking at the resources that we have and trying to figure out the path that it's going to take to get to our end goal. All right. And if we do workflow analysis right, what we're going to end up doing is we might look at things a little bit differently than how we would look at typical jobs and typical positions. So we kind of have to break down the categories that we're used to thinking about. All right. So a great example came up in one of my classes one time where students were analyzing what the work was that needed to be done to conduct a conference. And one of my students suggested that we needed to have an IT tech person in every room of the conference every time a presentation started. And then we started to have a discussion about, well, can we keep an IT tech person um, busy for the entire conference if we do this? If we have 50 IT people, are they going to be busy the entire time? And we quickly said no, they're not going to. So we came down to what is the activity that's going to be required? What is it that we need to do? What is our goal that we're trying to get to? What activity is going to get us there? And the goal that the students said was we just want to make sure there's somebody there to help presenters make sure that they can get their presentation online in the first 5 minutes. So that didn't require a full tech person. It required somebody who could help do that task. Okay. And as we break things down in such a manner, that's what we're looking at with workflow analysis. So we start with what exactly is the service we're trying to provide? What's the product we're trying to produce? What's the end goal we have to get to? Then we start to look at what are the resources that we have. Okay. What do we have in terms of material? What do we have in terms of equipment? What do we have in terms of human resources? Now, how do we take these resources and conduct activities that are going to support the output that we've identified? Now, once we've gone through the workflow analysis, then we transition to the workflow design. So in the analysis, that initial piece, we're kind of breaking down the work that needs to be done in the design process. Now that we've identified the tasks, we're going to go forward and we're going to assign them to different jobs and different positions. Now, if we take a quick trip back to the first chapter in our book, you remember we talked about human resource management's role in terms of managing the behavior of human capital, okay, and focusing on motivation and effort that people put into their work. So we talked a lot about designing jobs in terms of the positions that people are going to go into. Now we're going to talk a little bit about designing jobs in terms of making sure that they motivate our employees. Now, one of the tools that we'll reference in terms of looking at how we motivate employees is called the job characteristics model. Okay, and this model basically looks at different components, different factors to a job that can influence how motivating the job is. So the first component to it is skill variety. All right, and this is something that changed in the early 1900s in many positions as we began automating. Okay, so the assembly line as it was introduced really reduced skill variety in a lot of positions. Okay, so people who worked in factories on a specific spot in an assembly line had very few skills that were needed for their position. Similarly, they also had low task identity because high task identity would lead you to see the fruits of your labor, so to speak. But if you're in a specific position on an assembly line, you look at this and you see a very small part of the work that you do. So, for example, if you were to work at a company that produced parts for a phone, and all you did all day was pull a lever to get one part cut, you never actually see a phone get constructed. Okay, there's also the idea here of significance. All right, so what is the impact that your work has on others? And the more that you can see that, the more beneficial that that is, the more it's going to motivate you. Okay, so I worked in the construction industry. I always say, people who actually saw a house get completed, saw a family move into their house and enjoy their home would feel a little more task significance because they saw the impact that they were having on others. Okay. Then we can look at autonomy in your work. All right. So do you have freedom to make decisions, or are all the decisions made by each other, by others? So if you have autonomy in your work, you might be on an assembly line and notice that there's a problem, but have the ability to stop the line before the problem gets worse. If you don't have autonomy in your work, you might have to confer with someone else in order to get that stoppage approved. All right. And then the last piece is feedback. And we've all worked in jobs where we get great feedback, and we've all worked in jobs where we don't get much feedback at all. And it can be really frustrating to not get feedback, because if you don't have feedback, you don't necessarily know if you're doing the right things, and that can be demotivating. Whereas if you have feedback, as long as it's constructive feedback, it really can help motivate you, because you either know you're doing the right things and you want to continue to do them, or you understand there's opportunity in your performance and you're motivated to address those opportunities. Now we can also design jobs that are motivating by taking part in job enlargement. And this is just broadening the tasks that are performed in a job. And there's a couple ways that we can enlarge jobs. The first is through extension. Okay, and in job extension, we basically take multiple jobs and we kind of put them together in one job. All right, so going back to when I was a pricing manager, my company went through some job extension, because basically what they did was they started taking away some of my routine tasks and having me delegate those, and then giving me different areas to manage. So I went from just managing pricing to managing pricing and customer purchase orders, and we just continued to build onto this. All right, and by adding different components from different jobs, they were engaging in job extension. All right, we also can engage in job rotation. When I was a floor manager, I often tried to have my people work in different departments once a week. All right. So I made sure that they got cross trained so that they understood an area that was different from what they were typically working in. And then I asked my scheduler to make sure that people worked outside of their area once a week. And there were a couple purposes to this. One purpose to it was that for me, it helped me develop my employees. And we're going to talk about development later on in this course. It also helped give me some flexibility in case people called out sick. All right. But for my employees, it was a little bit motivating, because it allowed them to do something different and try new skills, so that they weren't coming in and just doing the same thing day after day. Now, job enrichment deals with giving employees an autonomy, enriching their work by empowering them, and essentially providing some motivation through the more intrinsic aspects of their work. All right, now Herzberg's two factor theory addresses this a little bit, so let's take a look at that. Now, the two factor theory says that there are two components to a job: that there are motivators and that there are hygiene factors. Okay, and the basic premise behind this is that the hygiene factors over here are all things that we kind of expect to be present in a job. So maybe good working conditions, maybe job security, pay, status, and so on. And that we expect these things to be here. And if they're here, that's great, but they don't motivate us. If they're not here, however, they can be demotivating. All right. The motivators over here on the left side, Herzberg says, are intrinsic factors. So responsibility, being satisfied, being recognized at work, having opportunities for achievement, having growth opportunities, being able to advance in your career. According to Herzberg, these are all motivating factors, and when they're present, they're going to increase employees' motivation. Now, there is a lot of intuition behind Herzberg's two-factor theory. Okay, and you're going to hear people talk about it in industry, which is part of why it's important that you understand it. But you also should know that the support for this in research is limited to a degree. In trying to design jobs that motivate, one of the things that we can also do is try to make sure that we meet our employees' needs and give them things where these things will help them and don't hurt the company. One way that we can do that is through flex time. And the idea behind flex time is that in our companies, we're going to identify core times that we need people to be present. So in this example, core time is between 9 and 3 p.m. Okay, maybe there's important meetings then, maybe there's a lot of client presence, who knows what it is. Okay, but this is the core time, and this 6 hour time, we need all of our employees to be present. All right. Then what we do is we say that's 6 hours, you have 2 hours more to work, and we turn around and we say, okay, you can either put that 2 hours on the end of your day and you can work till 5, or you can put it on the beginning of the day and you could start work at 7. All right. And this is something I saw in state government quite a bit, is that there were some people who were on a 7 to 3 schedule and other people who were on a 9 to 5 schedule. And it was great for the employees because it helped meet their needs. Sometimes it created a little bit of scheduling complications if we were trying to do something either at the beginning or the end of a shift. We're trying to make it available to everyone. But overall, it provided a lot of opportunities for employees. We'll also talk about job sharing in just a minute. And related to flex time, there's something called a compressed work week. And in a compressed work week, rather than working 5 8 hour days, we might have our employees work 4 10 hour days. We might have them work 3 12 hour days. But essentially, we allow them to do a week's worth of work in a shorter period of time. Now, job sharing is a situation where two part time employees carry out tasks associated with a single job. So we essentially take a single full time job and we split it between two people. And the benefits to this from the employee standpoint is that we often discount pay rates for part time employees. But when we engage in job sharing and we allow two people to split a job, then they don't necessarily have to be involved in the type of part time pay discounting that we typically see. We also have two people that are coordinating to make sure that this job gets done, as opposed to having a couple different people who we have in positions who aren't necessarily coordinating. Now, when I first started reading about job sharing, I wasn't sure if this ever really existed because in all my time in the industry, I had never seen it. And then I started looking for cases of it, and I actually found one that was very close to where I lived at the time. And it was a husband and wife team that were named co principals at an elementary school. And basically, they were given, as you can see down here in the article, they were given a $110,000 salary, okay, and a contract for 1 year, and then they had a benefits package. But that salary was split between the two people, and they each worked different roles of being principal in that school. Now, the last component of job design that we're going to touch on today is ergonomics. And ergonomics basically deals with the way people physically interact with the environment around them. Okay. And through good ergonomic job design, what our goals are is to minimize strain on employees and increase the efficiency of the jobs that they do. Now, as we think about examples of ways that organizations can use ergonomics to reduce physical strain, there are a lot of things out there. Okay, so instead of having manual pallet jacks, maybe you have electric pallet jacks that people can use. All right, in an office space, you might allow people to have chairs that help them sit better so that they don't have back problems, or you might have keyboards that reduce the likelihood of carpal tunnel syndrome. Okay, there's a lot of different equipment out there that we can use to reduce strain on employees. But also remember that we're thinking about efficiency as well. And one of my favorite examples when we think about efficiency actually comes from a hospital that was really looking to push making sure people were washing their hands. And they had signs up about washing their hands. They were talking about washing their hands all the time. Washing your hands is a big focus, as you would expect it to be in a hospital. Okay. But I'm in this hospital one day and I had to use the restroom. So I walked into the restroom. Okay. And I'm going to just draw a little picture of a restroom right here. And over here on this wall here on the right, this is where they had like the toilets and the urinals and stuff like that. So I came in the door is right here. Came in the door, I walked over to use the urinals and the toilet. Then, after using them, I had to walk past the door because that's where I had to wash my hands was over here. Then I had to go back to the door to leave. So this seems silly, but actually to wash your hands you had to go past the exit. Okay? Not a big deal. I wash my hands, don't get me wrong. I definitely wash my hands afterwards. But the point is, if we were designing an ergonomic job, or if we wanted this building to be designed in an ergonomic way, we would have our toilet and our urinal area here, we would have our sinks over here, and we would have our door over here. Because doing that would mean that in order to get out, you had to walk past the sink. It would increase your efficiency, decrease the likelihood that people would walk out without washing their hands. And that is all we have for ergonomics, and we're going to wrap up this lesson. Thank you for joining me, and have a great day.